and welcome to the Convex Conversation with me, broadcaster Helen Fospero. Today I'm meeting two incredible people whose lives have been touched by Alzheimer's, a cruel disease which affects almost 1 million people in the UK. Cian Adams is one half of the FTD Brothers. FTD stands for frontotemporal dementia, which Cian and Jordan's mum, Geraldine, was diagnosed with at 47 when Cian was just 9. She died 5 years later when he was 15. The family discovered that a faulty rare gene caused Geraldine's dementia. Some years later, when the boys were in their early 20s, they made the decision to get tested and found out they both carry the same rare gene like their mum, grandmother and aunt. So with the knowledge they could develop FTD in their 40s, they've become ambassadors for Alzheimer's Research UK, driven to help scientists find a cure. In 2024, they raised $250,000 through extreme running challenges, including running the length of Britain in a month, and their goal is to raise £1 million. Well, Cian is with me today with his girlfriend Helen Jolly, who's working on her PhD in dementia research at Oxford University, and I'm beginning to find out has become quite a runner herself. Cian and Helen, it's wonderful to meet you both. Thank you both for making the effort to come and record the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having us and the opportunity to share our story.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Oh, you're very welcome. Cian, first of all, tell us about the incredible challenge that you set yourself last year, running the length of Britain.
Yes, so myself and brother Jordan had been doing kind of local fundraisers for many years, really, in our hometown, Redditch, Worcestershire. We were kind of a little bit fed up of always starting from scratch, having to contact the local paper and getting friends to share us on social media and constantly starting from £0 and zero awareness, basically. So we wanted to take things to the next level. So we set ourselves the challenge from September 2024 till the 1st of October 2024 to run from Groats, the most northern point of mainland UK, all the way down to the southernmost point of mainland UK, which was Land's End. So it took us the entire month of September and we finished on the 1st of October, and it was one hell of a challenge, and managed to raise, I think now with gift aid, £340,000.
That's absolutely incredible. And Helen, you got dragged into it too. You ran many hundreds of miles with them, didn't you?
Yeah, about, 500 of it, because we were sort of helping with the peripheral stuff too. You were doing a lot of physio, and there was so much teamwork involved with the maintenance and the, cleaning the caravans and the food, and it just took a whole team of us to make it work. It was really incredible.
Cian, it's fairly helpful that you are a physiotherapist.
It definitely came in handy, to be honest.
How many people were actually involved in the challenge?
Wow, so across socials, it was kind of me and my brother pushing the content side of things. We also had a family friend, Nigel Watson, who at the time was suffering himself from prostate cancer, and a cause that he really champions every year, but took a break to help us with our challenge, and that was incredible.
68, by the way. He ran the whole thing.
Yeah, 900 miles at the age of 68, incredible.
If you can believe it.
And there's probably a team of kind of 10, family and friends in the background who were...
We had Agnes, she was really good because Agnes works in marketing, she's Jordan's wife. And she was really doing all the comms, which is actually really important.
Yeah, with local radio stations and correspondence with the BBC and trying to get the story out there as much as possible, basically. Cooks in the background,
and that ended
drivers.
Up being the BBC and the sort of comm stuff ended up being what really took it off, didn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, you did raise an incredible amount of money. And was it that BBC Breakfast appearance, do you think, that tipped the balance for you?
For sure. It was already gaining really good momentum prior to that, but that took
about
it.
£1,000 a day, weren't we?
Yeah, we
before that.
Ticking over about £1,000 a day, I think, which was still
it's like a
incredible.
Steady rise, because the aim was £100,000, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and everyone thought that, that's crazy. You won't.
We surpassed it, probably halfway through the challenge.
Well, that was the BBC thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I can't remember the exact numbers, but within about 4 minutes of being on the BBC Breakfast sofa, we refreshed our phones immediately from coming off air.
It's like a glitch.
It was that we thought it was broken. It had gone up by about 60,000, about 4 minutes. It was just incredible. We hadn't particularly rehearsed. We just kind of
got up at 5 in the morning.
Yeah, told our story as best as we could.
To get the taxi to Manchester.
Yeah, it was a right journey. Really glad and humbled, to be honest, that our story had resonated so well with so many people. Probably speaks to the fact that so many people are affected by this, and there's not too many people bringing it to people's attention, particularly young people. So.
The amount of people that we just came across, even just day to day, on the run, that were really moved by it and really supportive, was really fulfilling.
I think, though, these days, unfortunately, most of us, either we know somebody who's suffering from dementia or perhaps one of our family members is. So I would imagine a lot of people, Helen, wanted to share their stories and to let you know that they cared and were happy to support.
Yeah, it affects far too many people. And I think it's gone from being something that people go, that's just something that old people have and it can't be cured. And still now, even within medicine, there's a very sort of pessimistic view of how we deal with dementia, or it gets sort of shoved aside a bit. But I think we're quite keen to change that, and it is changing, I think. It is changing.
Cian, tell me about your mum, Geraldine.
It's quite ironic, really. She became symptomatic when I was so young. It was a real fight for a diagnosis. So she was only formally diagnosed in 2010. So I was 9 years of age. She was certainly, symptomatic a long time before that. So maybe 2007, 8, and I was maybe 7 or 8 years of age. So I was really, really young, and it's not the type of time where you expect to have to, you're just bumbling through life, aren't you? It's primary school, you're out with your friends. Yeah, you're in your own little world, really. It's not the kind of memories that you expect to have to cling on to or anything, if I'm honest. So one of the biggest things that I do struggle with is I don't really have any memories of what she was like prior to being ill, if that makes sense. So the large majority of memories that I have of my mum are, unfortunately, her being in a hospital bed in the front room, unable to talk, walk, feed herself, go to the toilet herself. She was incontinent, didn't recognise me, couldn't discern me from an inanimate object. So, yeah, sorry to talk so, almost crudely about it, but that's how it is, unfortunately. And I do rely on my older siblings, my dad, old photographs, stories from her friends and anecdotes to build a picture myself of reassuring myself that, I was really loved and that she did do so much to try and look after us, basically, because I don't tangibly have a recollection of that myself, if that makes sense.
No, it completely makes sense. And your older brother, Jordan, says that he felt that you both lost a little bit of her every day. And it's really sad that your memories are of how cruel this disease is and what it did to her, because she was only in her 40s, wasn't she, when she became symptomatic?
Absolutely. It was a real shock to the system. It wasn't on the cards. We did not expect this to happen whatsoever. So we all kind of remember the time where Dad sat myself, my brother Jordan and my older sister Kennedy on the sofa in the family home and said, look, Mum has this really rare type of dementia. It's terminal. There is no cure. There's not really any good disease-modifying treatments. He was quite strong on the fact that we would look after her in the family home and didn't want her to go into a care home. And chaos ensued, unfortunately. And caring for someone who is that ill in the family home for such a prolonged period of time, it was 5 to 6 years between diagnosis and my mum unfortunately passing away. It took a huge toll on the family environment, really, and we refer to it as kind of turmoil, what it did to our own mental health, our relationships between one another, and that still somewhat lives on today, unfortunately, and it's kind of imprinted on us all in good ways and bad ways as people. So really can't understate the effect on the caregiver and those around the person suffering with dementia that it has, and I think that will resonate a lot with anyone listening who's had that experience themselves, unfortunately.
And what your mum had is an uncommon form of dementia, isn't it? I'm going to ask Helen in a minute for the more scientific version of it, but it's rare and it's unusual, isn't it, FTD?
Yeah, so dementia is that kind of umbrella term that encapsulates all different types of dementia, and Alzheimer's falls underneath that umbrella term, but it's often the thing that people talk about because it's the most common form. So FTD is probably the third most common type of dementia after Alzheimer's, vascular, and then FTD. But we're talking about familial frontotemporal dementia, which is a really key distinction because familial or genetic cases account for kind of 1% of dementias, or less than, so extremely, extremely rare, hence the ridiculously strong family history. So our nan was one of 6, 4 out of the 6 had dementia in their 40s. Our mum was one of 13 cousins, 8 out of the 13 had dementia in their 40s. So clearly an extremely strong family history of early onset dementia, really, and typically becoming symptomatic mid-40s, plus or minus, and can have kind of, in some ways, can present a little bit more like Parkinsonism as well. Anyone familiar with that kind of group of neurodegenerative diseases knows that anything Huntington's, dementia, Parkinson's are all horrible things to happen to someone. So yeah, I really don't want to mischaracterise this. It's extremely rare, but yeah, an important distinction to make, I think.
Absolutely. And also led, Helen, to you applying and doing your PhD in dementia research.
Yeah, I think dementia is one of those things, despite the subtype, is just a really nasty condition. And I think anyone who's dealt with that sort of spectrum or lost someone that they love to that spectrum of diseases knows that it just feels really inhumane. And often another thing that characterises them is that they're really hard to treat. And I've been shied away from a lot because we didn't necessarily have the technology or the understanding of them to find cures or therapies. But that's definitely changing, and I think that's one of the reasons that I sort of pivoted into it, because I'd always work in genetics. Like when I met Cian, that was what my degree was. And just around the same time that you had your genetic result, I happened to get into this program at Oxford, which had a year where you could train before you start the actual PhD. So it's almost like an opportunity to do rotations in different labs. And I used that opportunity to retrain and designed my project around dementia research because I just saw it as an opportunity that I didn't want to miss.
And what goes on, Helen, in terms that we can perhaps all understand with FTD? And I know from Cian, obviously, that theirs is a bit different because it's familial FTD, but perhaps a lot of people listening to this will have experienced dementia in the family with elderly relatives, but fewer people have perhaps had first-hand experience when it's a person in their 40s that's suffering.
Yeah, a lot of the sort of similarities in the sort of mechanism of all dementias is that the proteins in our brain, which are sort of the building blocks of the brain, become dysfunctional. They move to the wrong places. They start to form clumps, and that can be different types of proteins, and that differentiates those diseases. So you might have in Alzheimer's, we have these things called amyloid, which has been in the news a lot, and tau. Parkinson's, it might be alpha-synuclein. So they've got these different names for these proteins, then they clump in different ways. But that is what tends to lead to the death of the brain cells, which then causes dementia, causes that cognitive loss. Similar mechanisms, and for the familial type of dementia that Cian's family has, they have a mutation, so a mistake in the gene makes it faulty, and that gene makes the protein called tau. And tau is also involved in Alzheimer's. So though it's a very rare thing to have a faulty gene, it's very common that tau becomes dysfunctional in dementia. And so it's a big drug target for a lot of pharmaceutical companies, and it's under a lot of scrutiny in sort of this academic world. People are trying to understand tau because it's very important in the brain, but it also can cause a lot of issues.
Is it reassuring in a way, Cian, that your girlfriend's at the centre of this cutting-edge research?
I think it's a bit of a tightrope, and you don't want to become this kind of Dr. Google obsessive person because, ironically, your time's shorter and you need to enjoy it more and not obsess about these things. But I do find it helpful to have someone who's on the other side of that, who is an expert, who can discern what is valid and what is scientifically accurate, what you might read, or the headline on the news, new discovery for Alzheimer's, okay, that drug actually isn't effective for my type of dementia, or these are the side effects, so it's not available on the NHS, and just someone to objectively reason around things that I might not otherwise understand. So yeah, it's got its pros and cons, but overwhelmingly positive, and really glad that we've got that asset.
Yeah, it's a really special understanding, I think, between you. Obviously, you were very young, the youngest in your family when you lost mum. Fast forward a few years, you realised the condition can be genetic. You'd lost your nan and your auntie. What was the thought process as a family behind getting tested to see if you had that faulty gene, and who went first and how did that play out? Yeah,
it's a case of familial frontotemporal dementia, and there's a fault within the genome, basically. And there's three most common mutations, but our family is MAPT or MAPT. Now, my dad has a working copy of that gene. 50% chance I inherited the working copy from my dad and had the same risk of inheriting a case of Alzheimer's or dementia as anyone on the street. Alternatively, if I inherited 50% chance of the faulty copy from my mum's side of the genome, then you are 99.99, aka 100% likely to develop symptoms of FTD in your lifetime. So in our family, it was Kennedy that led the way. So she's the eldest of us three siblings. So Kennedy got tested in 2017. We're very fortunate near us in the Midlands. There's a great genetics unit in Birmingham that are really, really forward thinking. So my sister was really extremely brave in taking the first plunge to find out. I must say that there's no obligation to find out, and would completely respect and understand individuals who are also kind of pre-symptomatic or potential carriers of any genetic mutation. They don't have to find out, and that's a decision that's very individual and must be kind of respected. Us three were kind of quite principled, quite stoic around the fact that there is no cure for this disease. We'd seen what it had done in the family home for 5-6 years, and it was horrendous. And for as long as there is no cure, the only way that we can, reliably stop this going any further is through, am I a carrier, yes or no? And then the kind of IVF options, basically, and planning around that. A lot of the trauma that we went through as children wasn't necessarily just losing mum, it was the way in which it happened and the way in which it almost dictates our future as well, and it's kind of encapsulated our whole life. So we have a lot of power that maybe our mum's generation didn't have, in terms of it's called Pick's disease when they were diagnosed, and there was no genetic testing process. They didn't understand the pathology half as much as they do now. So kind of using that power and autonomy to take some control over a situation you have absolutely no control in, if that makes sense.
Brave for Kennedy as well, being female, because although I don't understand all the science behind it, it seemed to affect the female side of your family. So I would imagine that was a huge relief to her and all of you, to realise that she didn't carry that gene.
Absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head. This may be not how science works. A scientist might laugh in the audience, but my sister shared a lot of character traits that my mum had. They looked very similar, personality-wise, very similar. And my sister was convinced that she had the mutation, to the point where she had to take time off work in advance of even finding out the test, just through anxiety and worry and stress, something that really kind of dominated her thoughts, and unable to sleep and stuff, really. So yeah, extremely brave in the situation that she was in, and a ginormous relief for the family, and the best news we'd had in a number of years, that she wasn't a carrier.
How long after Kennedy's test did Jordan decide that he was going to take the plunge too and find out?
He didn't leave it long. It was a huge kind of momentous occasion in the family, and this is obviously a very family-oriented trauma and situation, so I think we all got a bit of a boost from that, and allowed my sister to start a family and XYZ. So my brother didn't wait long at all. I think he got the ball rolling within 12 months or so. I've started the testing process back end of summer 2018. My brother did, so maybe a year later. You start with a bit of counselling. They get to know you as a person, understand your reasoning for wanting to find out, check that you're in a position to actually receive such news, because it obviously can have huge implications on your life going forward. So he was equally as brave, I think, to make that decision. But in September 2018, unfortunately, we found out that he was a carrier of the MAPT mutation, which means that he will, unfortunately, 100% inherit symptoms of frontotemporal dementia, based on family history, most likely in his mid-40s.
And there you are as the youngest. You've got a sister who thankfully doesn't carry it. Your brother does. That makes the hairs on my back of my arm stand up. What made you do it, Cian? Why did you want to be tested? And was your heart in your mouth at that stage? Because I'm guessing it probably was.
Yeah, definitely. And it was very contextual for me. I'd been at university, undergrad, prior to that for 3 years, and kind of enjoying just being young and my ignorance to the whole thing, if that makes sense. And I was going to finish my degree regardless. So having that information at that time would have only been a negative distraction. So it was very soon after graduating that we got the ball rolling. So probably graduated in the summer of 2022 and got in touch with the genetic counsellor by September and really got the ball rolling. And I think once I was in the big wide world and there was no safety cap of the end of university or graduation, and I had decisions to make around work and even in the future around family planning and stuff like that, even though we were so young, something that I think I had to know and I had to find out, because the worry of not knowing, I think, can't be understated, and it was massively anxiety inducing. So yeah, it was hard with those guys going ahead of me, and I was kind of in a rock and a hard place, because either I'll join my sister and have that kind of survivor's guilt and my brother's the only one who's going to have to deal with this, or obviously there's a traumatic future coming my way kind of thing. So it was extremely hard, but very proud of myself and Helen for going through that process, really. And it was a long old process, lots of genetic counselling, and eventually ends in like a blood test, basically, which we had in kind of January 2023. And the nurse is taking your blood, very nonchalant, laughing away. They have no idea why they're taking your blood, and it's probably the biggest day of your whole entire life. And you had to drive Helen to that appointment because I just felt sick. I was off work in advance of that appointment. I was working as a physio in the NHS, and I just could not deal with my own problems at that point, let alone with anyone else's. So I was off work well in advance of the test. And a month later, unfortunately, found out that I was a carrier of the genetic mutation too. So kind of joined my brother on that side of the equation, unfortunately.
And how are you coping with that? And how has it changed your attitude to life?
Yeah, it's a great question. Definitely still within it, I think. I'm not on the other side of that. It's an ongoing battle. It's not something that anyone can really prepare you for. It's such a niche thing when you share it. There's not many people who know how they would react in that situation. It's extremely unique. Having lost my mum to such a horrible disease and knowing that that's your future as well, it's not immediately tangible about how that feels, and implicates health insurance, implicates mortgages, family planning, what you want to do with your work life. There's not really a facet of your life that it doesn't cover. And it really makes this experience from the age of 9, the trauma of mum becoming ill, to then your deathbed is trying to be dictated by this one disease. So it's been extremely hard, if I'm honest. It's changed things probably in the way that we've taken the fundraising to another level, and that's been a real positive. And I've probably clawed back on my work life, so I'm now self-employed, and I do a master's degree in something I'm really passionate about, and I've got a name for it that I probably can't call it on this podcast.
You can.
But it's my
go on,
my fuck it token, basically.
You can call it that. You have every right to call it that.
And probably someone who is anxious to make big decisions or big calls in life, and it's probably given me a real kick up the bum to live for me, basically, and make the most of everything.
And live in the moment. And we can't underestimate, Helen, you're both so young. This was a huge deal for you too, as Cian's girlfriend and somebody who loves him. What was the experience of Cian going through that testing like?
It just felt unfair. Like, it felt unfair for you, Because obviously, like, when you care about someone, you like want the best for them. And so to know that you'd gone through that, like, I can't even begin to imagine what a childhood like that would be like. And I'm sort of very optimistic person. So I think I was, oh, well, maybe he won't have it. But I'm also a realist and work in science. So I kind of knew you told me very early on what the circumstances were. We always knew that you were going to find out when we graduated. So it was kind of there looming, but it just felt unfair. I didn't want that for you, irrespective of how it would impact me. And that's like a secondary thing to that. You feel a bit of anger or frustration because I'm a very solution focused person. I don't always like get really emotional about things. Like I find a solution, but that is something that just doesn't have one. So it really brought us together, I think, as well. When you realise that you can lose someone, like, it makes it all more precious, like the time that you have more precious. I just think like that was a really awful thing to like go through together. I would say like our relationship is probably stronger than most because we understand that and we really communicated well during that time. It's still like obviously something that's going to affect everything, and it's the same for Agnes, I know, because her and Jordan are married now and they've had to make decisions about things that have been really tough. So it does encompass the whole trajectory, but I wouldn't trade it because you're who I want to be with. People go, oh, that must be so hard, I don't know how you do it. You would. Any carer of someone with dementia probably will say the same thing. Of course you're going to do that for someone that you love. It's a no-brainer for me.
And also the living more in the moment is something we should all do in our life. And I would imagine you're so much more aware, Cian, that every day is precious and every day that you're healthy, that's precious. Do you feel in a way that you're living life in a more meaningful way and to the full, partly because you have a shadow hanging over you?
I think I'd love to come on here and say I'm perfect at all those things, but it's so easy to sweat the small stuff and get attracted by busyness of everyday life, and I'd be lying if I said I've completely overcome that. It's something I'm definitely more cognizant of and something that I actively try and work on far more than I did prior to my test result. But to say that I've achieved that or I'm living that through really, really well would not be true, I don't think. No. So it's definitely an ongoing process and something that's a bit of a skill.
How optimistic are you about research? Because you're here with Helen, who's working in science. And we know that in the Alzheimer's research world, things are changing very quickly. Is there hope that you're only in your 20s now, that by the time you're in your 40s, things may be very different in terms of a cure or drugs that can help minimise the symptoms that you fear you might have at some point?
Of course. I think it's a great question. There's no doubt Alzheimer's dementia is caused by diseases, and those are curable. They will be treatable one day. I firmly believe that, and it's moving in an amazing direction, and there's been some big breakthroughs in the last couple of years in the world of Alzheimer's and dementia that we've not had for decades and decades, and we are quite far behind the likes of cancer research and things like that. It's extremely complex. As an advocate or a patient, for want of a better word, I can't get too distracted by the whole thing. It kind of need blinkers on and focus on my own life and making sure that I kind of leave everything on the table and enjoy my life to the max, really, because I think I'm a realist and these cures are quite far away, and I don't want to have lived a life assuming that there'll be a cure by the time I'm 35, 40. So if it comes, that's fantastic. It's not something that I expect to arrive. It's helpful to have Helen in the science game to keep me posted on what's coming out.
Because I think I don't want it to be mistaken that I'm kind of doing this PhD to like find a cure. Like, I'm under no illusion that me as an individual is going to solve that problem. But I think doing a PhD in this area, I'm no expert, of course. You're training to be a scientist during a PhD, so you don't know nearly as much as you think you do. But you meet the right people, you're in the right circles, you're around people that care about what you care about. And I remember the genetic counsellor saying to me, like, do you think you'll find that difficult working in something so personal? To be honest, I'm upset about it anyway. So I'd rather be upset and do something. And day to day, it's the same as any other job. And I do really feel like we both now probably work in things that we're really passionate about. And maybe we wouldn't be here if it hadn't been for sort of that understanding of mortality and that life is short and that you should do things that you enjoy. I enjoy working in science and I work around wonderful people. So I think that's probably one of the reasons that I do it. Working in this area means that I'm more aware of new developments, and I try and also be very pragmatic, because if you expect there to be something and then there isn't, you don't want to put yourself in that position.
Do you think we are in quite a good position? Because there have been some positive developments, certainly reported in the news, in the Alzheimer's sphere, haven't there?
Yeah, I think there's been these 2 new approvals, lecanemab, donanemab. They target amyloid, so that's the other pathology in Alzheimer's. And that was really seminal because though they have really moderate effects, they are the first drugs to have ever met their endpoints in clinical trials for Alzheimer's, which is something that people have been trying to do for decades. And we just simply haven't had the understanding of the disease to develop a drug to target it. Because if you don't know what's causing it, you don't know how to intercept that. And I think that knowledge has really expanded over the last sort of 10, 15 years, because we have these things called stem cell models. So we can grow neurons in a petri dish now, the nerve cells in the brain. That's changed things a lot. And we also have the advent of computational power, AI. These things are massively changing. So a lot of the things that scientists might have spent hours and days and weeks doing in a lab now can be expedited much faster, and things are really changing. And I also think money is a massive thing. And with lecanemab, donanemab, though they have these really moderate effects and they're not available on the NHS, which is a problem, they will carve the way for much more effective therapeutics beyond that. So I think it's kind of from an investment standpoint, a lot of big pharma companies sort of reopen their pipelines to develop these types of drugs because they've seen, oh, someone made it work finally, so maybe we can.
What do you want to do, Helen, when you finish your PhD? Do you have any idea of where you're going next, career-wise?
Probably not. I think another 2 years, maybe I'll have an idea, but at the moment it's just focus on the PhD and enjoy it.
The challenges, Cian, sound like they take a lot of planning. We've only really talked about your massive one when you ran the length of Great Britain. Do you find them a very positive distraction?
Yeah, for sure. And I think you've got to be careful because this disease has kind of ruled our life or tried to, and it breeds such a passion and a fire within you that you want to do something about it. And you want to advocate for sufferers and caregivers and raise as much money as possible. And these challenges are an incredible way to do that, really. But I think personally, something I'm very aware of is not using too much of my life energy on all of that stuff to make sure that I still live a meaningful life for myself. So still definitely getting the balance right with that sort of stuff. And we think maybe once per year gets the balance right so we can get the most out of life and then also make the most of these challenges. But yeah, certainly when they come around, they're incredible. Like I would love to do that challenge again, spending a month with the family, a month off work. When would you ever get to spend a month with the family in a caravan running around with bright ginger hair in bright orange t-shirts?
I thought you had ginger hair, actually, when I looked. But then I don't think I had my glasses on when I was looking at the post. So then I was quite surprised when I realised your hair is actually dark brown.
Yeah, neither of us were natural orange hairs, redheads.
No, and it was really orange, wasn't it? It wasn't just red. I realise now I've put my glasses on and had a look at your post. And lovely as well that you and Jordan have got that connection. Are you close as brothers?
Definitely, and I think even more so since this test result, unfortunately. It's such a rare thing and people, maybe from the outside in, struggle to characterise that, really understand that, and I don't blame them. It's such a rare thing, but to have someone who's kind of had almost identical life experiences to me and their future looks very much the same as mine, it just naturally brings you closer together. And when the rest of the world feels like they don't understand, you can always talk to your brother. So yeah, very grateful for him and very proud of him leading the way with the genetic testing process and his response to that test result. 5 years ahead of my result, I don't think we would have become the FTD Brothers and have done all of these things if he hadn't have got that kick-started. So yeah, I'm very proud of him, very lucky to have an older brother carving the way.
What about Kennedy? I'm guessing she's really supportive, but hard situation for her as well, because you talked about when you were going for testing, if you didn't have the gene, were you going to feel guilty that you didn't and Jordan did? So it must be hard for her, but I'm guessing she's right behind her younger brothers.
Absolutely. She's incredibly, from the outside in, she manages that kind of role incredibly well. She's extremely supportive and puts everything aside to be there for myself and my brother, because it could have been her, and it's just completely out of our control, the fact that it's ended up with me and my brother and it wasn't her. And it's not only that kind of psychological phenomena of that guilt and survivor complex that she has now, but also the future, logistically, practically, she will most likely, unless we lose our lives before for any other reason, touch wood, that she's going to lose both of her younger brothers to something horrendous and almost live through how we lost our mum all over again and our auntie and our nan. So kind of a perpetual cycle of trauma, to be honest. And I think she navigates what is a truly tricky situation incredibly well. And she is amazing. Yeah.
You've got your special place. I saw on one of your posts. Your mum's got a bench, hasn't she?
Yes.
And do you spend quite a bit of time there? And is that somewhere where you can maybe talk to her or just have thoughts about her?
For sure. Maybe other people who have grieved and are grieving will resonate with this, but I don't particularly feel close to my mum at her gravestone or in the cemetery. That's not a place where I ever spent time with her. It doesn't feel particularly connected, but it's around our local lake and it's a beautiful little setting, particularly in the summer. So yeah, it's lovely to go and spend some time down there, and I feel much more connected to her there and at home and around our little town or village than I do in other places. So yeah, it's an amazing little spot.
Nice that you've got a little spot to go to. What's the 2025 challenge?
Definitely in the calendar is Sydney Marathon, 31st of August 2025.
The Sydney Marathon?
Yes.
Who slipped that one in there? Sydney, Australia. Whoa.
Yes. So we were amazed to find out that Alzheimer's Research UK are partnering with the event, I believe, and have some charity places, which we were very fortunate to get hold of. So we will be doing a bit of a campaign around that in August, and hopefully we'll boost some donations and some awareness for us on the southern side of the world. And then into 2026, we can give some hints, as I think it's kind of been exposed already.
Go on, give us some hints.
We kind of ran the challenge, the UK challenge in 2024 with our Irish heritage, and it being the Irish side of the family that unfortunately suffered with FTD. We thought that's a quite kind of nice lateral step and to get the community over there going. So 32 counties in Ireland, a marathon in each in consecutive days, to finish on our mum's birthday in May 2026 in Dublin.
My maths isn't good enough. How many miles is that? I should be able to work that out.
I actually think it's very similar to what we did for the UK. So around 900, 1,000, around that ballpark.
Gosh, that's lovely that you're aiming to finish on your mum's birthday. And actually, you have to finish on your mum's birthday. I'm sorry, Cian, but if you've got blisters or strains or pulled hamstrings, you have to make that.
Exactly. So
no pressure there.
Yeah, exactly. I think whenever we were struggling on the UK challenge, and believe me, we were struggling at points, the big why as to why we were able to continue throughout whatever ailment it was that we had. So yeah, I think it's really poignant to finish on mum's birthday, and she'd be hopefully super proud watching down. So I think, there'll be no blisters stopping us in Ireland.
I'm sure she'll be super proud of what you're doing. And how much training is it for you, Helen, and also for Cian and Jordan when you have a big challenge like this in front of you?
You do try and fit as many long runs in as you can around the busyness of life. We're both very busy people, and your master's, running a business, PhD, it's a lot to try and fit in. You try and just run whenever you can, and running is quite an accessible thing to do, so you can just put your trainers on and get out there. And we do it together as well, because we only started long distance running in 2023, didn't we? When Jordan and you had this crazy idea to do this running challenge, we'd only just run our first half marathon. So the idea of running a half marathon plus more than that every single day for a month was very crazy. And I don't think you can do enough training. Nothing can really prepare your body for that kind of level of activity. But when we were doing it, the first week was really hard, and then you do just kind of adapt. I think the human body is quite impressive, and after a while you just go a bit numb.
At least you've done that kind of distance before, Cian, but what are the difficulties and challenges? Even proficient runners ending the marathon, hobbling over the line, even really, really good runners. But to do that day in and day out over a 30-ish day period is quite extraordinary, much more than the Marathon des Sables and all that kind of thing. So what happens to your body en route?
Yeah, I'm kind of peering through my fingers talking to you about this as a physio. Do as I say, not as I do type thing. Yeah.
No, I bet you wouldn't be telling your clients to do this.
Absolutely not. So unfortunately, that level of load is just completely unprecedented, and you can't really mimic it in training. Injuries are inevitable, and it's when, not if. And then it's making a sensible decision around, will this injury cause permanent damage? And maybe we think about reining it in a little bit, or if I think it's just soft tissue and we can crack on. You train as much for these things as you can. It's as much of a mental challenge, if not more, than a physical one. You fuel as best as you can, recover as best as you can, and you keep on going. But yeah, ultra running is a different species, I think.
It's interesting that it's new to you both as well. I was going to ask where that passion had come from, and I presume perhaps you'd been both running for years and years, so it's relatively new. Why did you choose running?
It was all to do with fundraising and something really accessible that we could both train towards doing. The reason it was probably running immediately was the fact that my brother had already been doing running challenges in our local town in Birmingham, half marathons, etc. Maybe 5-6 years prior to my test result. Once I became a carrier, that was the real fire in my belly then to say, I can't watch you do all these half marathons and marathons. I have to join in and contribute to this somehow. And that's when I sent him a big old text in maybe 3-4 months after my result in May 2023. I sent a big scroll of a text to my brother about how we would run the length of the UK and we would raise £100,000 and we would do it via short form content on TikTok and Instagram, and we would get on breakfast television and all these things that seemed completely crazy at the time. I was full-time physio, my brother was a full-time painter decorator. He got his mortgage sponsored to do this challenge. We had no followers at the time. It was a ridiculous punt. But now we raised £340,000 till today. We have amassed almost 500,000 followers across a couple of platforms online. All just kind of self-taught, really. So, yeah, it's just if you want to do something, you can definitely do it.
And your aim is £1 million, isn't it? That's the figure that you've got at the moment in your mind.
Yeah, somewhat arbitrary. If we raise £1 million, we're never going to retire and pack up. So it's just a nice figure, I think, that we set ahead of any of this becoming a reality, that we thought, wow, how incredible would that? 2 lads from a normal town in the West Midlands who could, share their story online and raise £1 million. Wouldn't that be amazing? But the numbers don't really matter. The needle is moving, awareness is raising, money is coming in. So yeah, trying to enjoy the process a little bit more and not just focus on the outcome. But yeah, £1 million is what we set our sights on.
Well, your challenges have caught the attention of Line of Duty actress Vicky McClure, who we featured on our podcast with her incredible dementia choir. I think you need to contact Vicky and get her to help you promo your next challenge and maybe help you with a bit of that fundraising.
Absolutely, yeah. Vicky was one of the first people to get behind our kind of challenge, whether she remembers or not. It was huge. All of us at one of the campsites in Scotland have shared one of our posts or one of our stories, and we were like, Vicky McClure just shared our story. Bless her, she probably doesn't remember now, but I know that she's kind of been touched by Alzheimer's and dementia and is doing a lot in that kind of space and the dementia choir and everything. So yeah.
You're a Line of Duty fan, aren't you, as well, Helen, like me?
It's great. Yeah. And she's great as well. It's so nice that she's been sharing those posts for us and was there from quite early on, because that was before any of it took off. That was day 6, I think, of the challenge. And we were all...
That must have given you such a big boost. And how important is it to you, Cian, that you're an ambassador for what is a magnificent charity, Alzheimer's Research UK?
It's incredible, really. And I'd say, other than a formality, not much has tangibly changed. It hasn't changed my focus or the amount of work that I put in or what I want to achieve in terms of a cure and funding AI UK's work. Probably just puts us in more of a position to have opportunities like today to share our story and get more people on board. From a personal point of view, just a big privilege and kind of a recognition that the work that we put in has been recognised, and there's a charity and an organisation there with open arms trying to help us share our story. So it's incredible, very grateful. And yeah, long may it continue.
Well, I'm very grateful that you both took the time out to share what is an extraordinary story. You are incredible young people. Anything we can do, Convex, as you know, supports Alzheimer's Research UK. Anything we can do as Convex, or I can do with the people I know in television. I think if my ITV friends are listening, we need to get you live on Good Morning Britain and on the Lorraine programme, as well as BBC Breakfast, which also gave you that incredible boost. Your story is amazing. How you handle yourself is incredible. And give our love to Kennedy and Jordan. I wish you both lots of luck with everything that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helen.
You've been listening to Cian Adams, one half of the FTD Brothers, who are aiming to raise £1 million for Alzheimer's Research UK in memory of their mum Geraldine and other family members who died of an uncommon form of dementia. And also Cian obviously has been telling us today about how unfortunately he and his brother Jordan also carry that faulty gene. The money raised is to help scientists continue in their search for a cure for such a cruel disease that affects so many people across Britain. And a special thank you as well to Cian's girlfriend, Helen, who's studying dementia for her PhD at Oxford and is supporting the family in their challenges. Download and subscribe to our series at convex.podbean.com or search The Convex Conversation on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to yours. I'll be back next week with 17-year-old American mountaineer Emma Schwerin from Connecticut, who's just made history by becoming the youngest woman to summit the world's 7 highest peaks. Maybe she wants to come and join Cian and Helen on one of their running challenges, including Mount Everest. And she did it just at the age of 17 in record time. See you then.